Today, we're taking a deep dive into Roméo Dallaire's harrowing account, Shake Hands with the Devil. It's a book that really confronts you with this stark contrast, doesn't it? Rwanda's blue-green hills and the haunting story of evil they held.
It really does, and it's such a profound, challenging topic because we're getting it straight from Dallaire, his daily notes, UN documents, his own, deeply personal memories.
Right. It's not abstract.
Not at all. It's intimate, raw. You're seeing the 1994 Rwandan genocide right through the eyes of the UN Force Commander on the ground.
So our mission today really is to unpack not just what happened, but why it mattered so much.
Right.
We'll explore, the huge challenges of international intervention, the human cost when the world looks away.
And the personal toll.
Yeah.
The immense personal toll on someone who witnesses that kind of horror.
Exactly. We want you to walk away with those kind of aha moments, clarity on a really complex, devastating time, but without, drowning you in information.
Yeah, trying to distill the core lessons from this tragedy.
Okay, so to really get why General Dallaire was in such an impossible spot, maybe we should go back. His early life, what shaped him?
Absolutely. His path to Rwanda, it started way before '94. He was a child from war-ravaged Holland. The army was his first love, he said. You can almost picture him, setting up toy soldiers, battlefields on the rug.
Already drawn to it?
Deeply. And he got exposed to horror early on. His mother, she rarely showed emotion apparently, but she'd tell him these stories about wartime Holland, the knock on the door, the boots.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this vivid image of a young Jewish man, his face white, staring, being taken by the Gestapo, gone into the Holocaust nightmare that stays with you.
And his father. The night before Dallaire left for military college, just 18, he gave him some pretty stark advice.
Incredibly profound. He basically said a soldier's life, the satisfaction, it comes at a huge cost, no thanks. And that no civilian, no government, sometimes not even the army itself, would grasp the sacrifices made.
Chillingly accurate, given what happened later. What does that tell us about, the burden of service?
It's almost a prophecy, isn't it? It foreshadows the isolation, the lack of understanding Dallaire would face. It really highlights how soldiers carry this invisible weight of collective indifference. A huge insight into the personal cost.
And his career in Canada. He was in a bit of a unique spot.
Yeah, as a francophone in a largely anglophone military, he felt a little apart, he said, defending both sides in a way. And then there was the FLQ crisis in Quebec, separatist tensions. He was only 24.
Facing potentially his own community.
Potentially friends, family, and hostile crowds. With live ammo, imagine that moral weight.
He also had a lot of peacekeeping experience before Rwanda, didn't he? Cambodia, the Balkans.
He did. And that experience was crucial because he was already seeing that the old peacekeeping models, they were hopelessly outdated, just not equipped for the messy, dangerous situations his troops were walking into.
So seeing these dangers, what was his big worry for his soldiers?
The psychological toll. He was deeply concerned. He actually asked for clinical psychology experts for support.
And the UN's response.
Basically, we barely have enough bayonets, let alone money for low-priority stuff like mental health. That's almost verbatim.
Wow. Just wow.
It shows a systemic failure, doesn't it? Just not grasping the full human cost beyond the physical injuries.
Okay, so then the order for Rwanda comes. Almost casual. Check out Rwanda, and you're in charge. What did he even know about it then?
Hardly anything. His initial intel was like a tourist map, a few academic articles that boil it down to a simple intertribal conflict. He called it confidence born of ignorance.
And his first impressions.
He was struck by the beauty, those blue-green hills, the French culture. It stirred this passionately sympathetic response, which makes the later tragedy even more jarring, that initial optimism.
So he arrives hopeful. But what were the tensions already bubbling under the surface, the warning signs?
Oh, they were there. You had the Hutu government, the exiled Tutsi RPF led by Kagame. The Arusha Accords were meant to be the peace plan. But Dallaire noticed the government's presidential guard, Habyarimana's Praetorian Guard, acting really arrogant, and getting UNAMIR, the UN mission, actually deployed. Huge problems, delays, penny pinching, UN red tape, political games.
You mentioned the British holding back.
Yeah, they wouldn't deploy until the status of mission agreement, the SOMA, was signed. They'd learned lessons the hard way in Mozambique, apparently.
And this brings up the whole Chapter 6 versus Chapter 7 thing. Can you break that down? Why was it so critical?
It's crucial. Chapter 6 is traditional peacekeeping. You need everyone's consent. Chapter 7 is peace enforcement. You can use force. The problem was moving to Chapter 7.
Why was that so hard?
Because, frankly, No nation would be prepared to contribute troops for Chapter 7 in a country like Rwanda. No strategic interests, no oil, no major threat to international peace, supposedly.
So humanitarian intervention takes a backseat to national interest.
That's the harsh reality Dallaire slammed into. It exposed this fundamental flaw. Nations prioritize themselves unless there's something in it for them.
And he kept trying to warn them.
Constantly. He compared himself to Moshe the Beetle from Elie Wiesel's Night, warning about the Holocaust but being ignored, ridiculed. Dallaire felt ridiculed for his prescience and mistrusted for his emotion. They told him he was being too simplistic. The world just wasn't listening.
Then came the genocide facts. This was specific intelligence, wasn't it?
Extremely specific from an informant, Jean-Pierre, Hutu extremists planning to exterminate Tutsis and moderate Hutus, training militia the Interahamwe, distributing weapons lists. It was all laid out.
What did Dallaire want to do?
He sent an urgent cable to Kofi Annan in New York, raid the arms caches, seize the initiative. He had a reasonable, carefully laid out plan.
And Annan's response?
A firm no. Dallaire was not to confront the extremists, full stop.
Well, I guess because of Somalia. The Mogadishu line?
Exactly. The U.S. disaster in Somalia, where 18 Rangers died, was just 3 months earlier. The UN, especially Annan, was terrified of crossing that line, of another failed intervention escalating, so the decision was made to essentially bury the genocide facts.
What did that do to Dallaire's position?
It created this total disconnect. New York saw him as a loose cannon, maybe too aggressive, not as someone on the ground seeing the reality. That one decision, avoiding confrontation, it basically tied his hands. Catastrophic consequences.
And meanwhile, the political situation was just stuck.
Completely gridlocked. They couldn't install the new transitional government, the BBTG. Hutu power factions kept blocking it. And the violence kept escalating. There was a massacre in November, a mob attack provoked by the Presidential Guard in January.
Dallaire must have known where this was heading.
He absolutely did. He kept saying, this isn't classic peacekeeping anymore. We're on the brink. But, New York seemed fixated on past failures, almost waiting for it to blow up before they'd act.
And then it did blow up. April 6th, 7th, 1994. The plane crash.
President Habyarimana's plane shot down. That was the trigger. Immediate widespread violence.
How fast did it escalate?
Terrifyingly fast. Presidential Guard roadblocks instantly. Targeted killings of opponents, like Prime Minister Agathon Rwanda. This wasn't random chaos. It was planned. Swift. Brutal.
And then the murder of the Belgian peacekeepers?
10 Belgian paracommandos at Camp Kigali. Disarmed, then murdered. That sent shockwaves. But the scene at the Gikondo Parish Church, the Polish mission, that's what really seared into Dallaire's mind.
What did his troops find there?
Just unimaginable horror. Hundreds of massacred men, women, children, some still alive, barely. The image he couldn't shake was a baby trying to nurse from its dead mother.
My God.
And the killers. They apparently got tired, left, and came back later to finish the job. Dallaire's team knew immediately this wasn't just killing, this was slaughter, wholesale. Even if they didn't use the word genocide right away, the scale, the planning, it was undeniable.
So as the genocide unfolds, the world pulls out.
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? After the Belgian soldiers were killed, the international community decided to withdraw most of UNAMIR.
How did that feel on the ground?
It's like a total betrayal, especially for the remaining Belgian officers. Dallaire begged them to stay. He argued, we could not abandon the Rwandans, couldn't desert the thousands under their protection.
But Canada stayed.
Canada made the unique decision to reinforce the mission with really good staff officers, even as others were packing up. A significant point.
But the Security Council, Resolution 912,
reduced UNAMIR to a skeleton force, just 250 soldiers, mostly for their own protection, despite all the official language like shocked, appalled, deeply concerned.
What was the effect of that withdrawal?
Devastatingly demoralizing. The Bangladeshi troops pulling out, Dallaire said they were portrayed as scared rats abandoning a sinking ship. It sent a clear message to the killers. Go ahead. The world doesn't care.
And for the few who remained.
Living the horror daily. UN compounds became sanctuaries for thousands of terrified people, mostly Tutsis, moderate Hutus, facing dehydration, disease, starvation. The troops shared their own food, their water. They got sick too.
An impossible mandate.
Totally. Dallaire said, I had no real idea of when I could improve their situation, but I needed to send a strong signal. We were into operational risk. He was constantly negotiating ceasefires, safe passage, driving down roads he called a road into hell, people fleeing, checkpoints, bodies everywhere.
Did he ever confront the killers directly?
He describes chilling encounters, meeting Interahamwe leaders where one just blurted out the fact that they were doing the killing, just admitted it.
And the psychological toll on his team.
Immense. His staff became like zombies, he said, over-irritable, identifying with the victims, just inhabiting the horror. They needed breaks in Nairobi, but there was no budget for the walking wounded. It just shows the mental scars, often ignored.
Plus the logistical nightmares you mentioned.
Relentless. Only 10 trucks for almost 1,000 troops. APCs that didn't work. Russian manuals, no spare parts. Vehicles vandalized en route. Needing water desperately, and the UN admin wants call for proposals.
While millions were being spent elsewhere.
Exactly. Millions of dollars a day in the former Yugoslavia, Dallaire noted. He had about $50 million for the entire year in Rwanda. The disparity is shocking. It screams indifference.
Then the French intervened with Operation Turquoise. How did Dallaire view that?
With apprehension. He acknowledged the humanitarian goal, maybe, but saw the political agenda. He worried it would encourage the extremists. And it backfired in a way the RPF saw his French-speaking African officers as allied with the French and retaliated against them.
In U.S. still dragging its feet.
Delays, obstacles, the British playing a coy supporting role. There was that awful exchange with General Schroeder who said, "Don't overwhelm an already overstressed infrastructure." Dallaire thought U.S. resources were the solution.
And that horrific estimate.
Yeah. That it would take the death of 85,000 Rwandans to justify the risking of the life of one American soldier.
What does that even say?
It just lays bare the cold, brutal calculation. National interest versus human lives. Certain lives deemed less valuable. It's the kind of moral relativism Dallaire fiercely condemns later.
The fighting eventually focused on Kigali, the capital.
Yes. The battle for Kigali was intense. The airport was a key battleground. He praised the Ghanaian troops holding the line under heavy fire. He saw the chaos of evacuations, but also the quiet bravery of his medical teams.
He used a chilling phrase for Kigali afterwards.
Scorched human scenario. He estimated maybe only 20 or 30,000 people left alive there. The RPF basically conquered an empty country. And, he notes, conducted their own reprisals, exactions against enemies left behind. It shows the totality of the destruction.
He also talks about being an accountant of the slaughter, the hidden horrors.
Yeah, that story of seeing a child's body move in a ditch only to realize it was maggots, its stomach churning. And he acknowledged later the scale of the systematic rape that was part of the genocide, often overlooked initially.
And the hate radio, RTLM.
Just kept broadcasting, relentlessly pumping out hate, even to refugees in camps outside Rwanda, showing how powerful that propaganda was, how it kept fueling the fire.
Was there ever a moment where things looked like they might turn? A moment of hope?
There was one brief moment. Dallaire called it music to my ears. The UN finally seemed to recognize that letting the killing continue was senseless. They granted UNAMIR offensive authority. Finally, they could do something to stop the killing.
But
hopes dashed. Immediately. The French ambassador called his plan to move refugees unworkable. U.S. apathy just killed any momentum. It was crushing.
And this took a toll on Dallaire personally.
Hugely. His staff got really worried. There's an incident where he fired his pistol wildly at dogs attacking his goats. They noted, the general is losing it. The exhaustion, the stress on him and his core team, it was immense. You see the burden on the few who stayed.
And the end of his mission wasn't exactly handled well either.
Not at all. He found out he was being replaced not through official Canadian channels, but from the U.S. rep to the UN, then friends and family calling him. Just unceremonious.
How were his last days in Rwanda?
Bittersweet, he describes it, the change of command parade, leaving. But he also felt this physical pull, a longing for Rwanda even as he flew away.
And coming home. Back to normal life.
Anything but normal. He struggled profoundly. PTSD, suicide attempts, therapy. His story really forces us to see the hidden, lifelong wounds these missions can inflict, especially when you're forced to witness hell but aren't allowed to intervene properly.
So looking back, what did Dallaire think could have made a difference? What was needed?
His list is chillingly practical. Political savvy, good intelligence, diplomatic weight, properly trained troops, a stronger mandate, and a budget increase he estimated at only about US $100 million. Peanuts, really, in the grand scheme of things.
And his accusation, j'accuse.
It's powerful, directed squarely at the international community's failures. He blasts that moral relativism, acting only when public opinion demands it, only risking soldiers if a mission is deemed worth it strategically.
He calls risk-free human rights intervention a contradiction.
A moral contradiction, yes, because genuine commitment can't be conditional. It can't just be about convenience or strategic gain. That's a key takeaway, isn't it?
And his final warning about the rage he saw.
That's maybe the most universal point. The rage he saw in those teenage killers, he believes it's the rage of people everywhere with no rights, no security, no future, no hope. People pushed to the absolute limit will do desperate things.
What's the lesson there for us today?
It's a stark reminder, I think. If we ignore fundamental human needs, dignity, hope, we risk creating the very conditions for future Rwandas. Despair and neglect are fertile ground for violence.
So this deep dive, it really isn't just history, is it? It's about today, about human rights and international responsibility, about thinking critically when we're bombarded with information about complex conflicts.
Absolutely. The echoes are loud and clear: the failure of political will, the cost of inaction, the need for timely intervention. These lessons from Rwanda are still painfully relevant in crises unfolding right now.
It leaves us with a tough question, doesn't it? As we think about Dallaire, about Rwanda, how do we, individually, collectively, square that desire for peace with the reality of evil? How do we make never again actually mean never again?
It requires facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our governments, about our collective responsibility.
Definitely something to keep thinking about long after this conversation ends.